welcome back to Victory Vision. This is Micaiah, and we have here with us Dylan, aka Dylan. And then we have Pastor Eric not here with us, and we're excited about the podcast here today. And before we start, I just learned yesterday that 80% of all podcasts never make it past the 20th episode. And I am happy to say that we have surpassed the 20th episode. I said it was like 23 or 24, something like that. But Brother James says we're past 30. So just want to say that's awesome today. But we're going to talk on the subject today of just stinking thinking in kind of a synopsis. And I wanted Brother Eric to start. He has some good notes and some good thoughts on this. And so we'll kind of give it to him to hit it off.
Yeah, well, I normally when I talk about this with people, I start with 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where it talks about charity, which is love that's in action, and through it he goes through, though I speak with the tongue of men and angels and have not charity, I become a sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. I'm just making noise. And he goes through several things there, and when he get down to verse number 5, he says, verse number 4, charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked. And this is the little phrase that we want to attach to this whole thought, is thinketh no evil. When I love people, and I truly love people, then I shouldn't be thinking negatively or bad about them. And we're going to kind of discuss that as we go, but I need to guard the way I think. And I need to try to think the best of people instead of letting my mind drift towards the worst of people, especially people that I say that I love, that I care for. Now, we were sitting around discussing this before we started, and just looking at if we're saying, we're talking about cynical thinking or being overly critical with our thinking of others. And Dylan was saying that he was making some confessions in here and saying, I struggle with this sometimes. And I was like, I struggle with this all the time. I'm teaching a class right now and talking about sometimes our greatest weakness is found within our greatest strength. And what's always served me well is having an analytical mind and analyzing things. The problem is I'm a thinker, that's good. I can be an overthinker, that's bad. And that's what I have to deal with sometimes, and that lends itself to this. This lesson came out of my own issues that the Bible has convicted me about, and I've thought, all right, I got to fix this. And then I created this lesson out of just going through that myself, thinking, I've got to watch how I think about people. And there's a difference between being someone that is concerned. Concern is not a bad thing. Being interested or affected by people, desiring to look into a matter to help somebody, that's not a problem. Being cautious. The Bible tells us that we're supposed to be sober and vigilant because we've got a real adversary walking around trying to devour us. So being sober or being cautious, that's not a bad thing. Those are good things. Having discernment, the Bible says that's a good thing to have. We're supposed to have discernment or being able to judge things properly. That's not a problem. Being discerning. The problem comes in. This is where we start having issues. We move from being concerned or cautious or discerning. We start becoming suspicious of people, and we start becoming cynical of people. When we start, being skeptical of everything everyone's doing around us, that's a problem. And there's some people. I've done this. This has been me before. That I've thought that I'm being discerning when actually I'm really just being suspicious, and I'm being skeptical of people, and I'm almost looking for the evil and imagining evil where there is no evil there. There's nothing wrong there, and I'm finding evil where there is no evil. And so I have to tell myself, hey, stick with facts, and not how you feel about a situation, but stick with facts, because you need to stick with what is true about a situation. And I've written this down several times. I thought this is a pretty interesting thing to think on, is that love doesn't rush to judgment, and it doesn't immediately think evil of somebody. So we have to, kind of give the benefit of the doubt. The story that I wanted to kind of go to, and then have you guys kind of talk about your own experiences or things that y'all have seen, is in 2 Samuel 10. That's kind of where we got the idea of the stinking thinking. And I'll read that to you real quick and just kind of look at it. But in chapter 10 and verse 1, it came to pass after this that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanan his son reigned in his stead. Then said David, I will show kindness. And I think it's important to understand that his intention was a comforting spirit. I will show kindness unto Hanan the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. And David sent to, here it is, comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon. So he's coming, I've got written down in my notes in my Bible, a comforting spirit. But I want you to see, this is what we're talking about, a cynical spirit. In verse number 3, and the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanan, their lord, thinkest thou that David doth honor thy father, that he hath sent comforters unto thee? That's exactly what he did do. This man's watching a situation where someone is trying to comfort, and something speaking to him saying it's not really for comfort. It was for comfort, but something speaking saying it's not for comfort. And it says, hath not David rather sent his servants unto thee to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? Wherefore, so the comforting spirit, the cynical spirit, and now you're going to see the change. Wherefore Hanan took David's servants, shaved off one half of their beards, cut off their garment in the middle, even to their buttocks, and sent them away. What a shame. That's crazy. Every time I read that, I'm like, that is pretty crazy that they did that. But anyway, this is a moment of humor there, thinking about what they did to them. But they shamed them, basically. And verse number 5, when they told it unto David, he sent to meet them, because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, tarry at Jericho until your beards be grown, and then return. And when the children of Ammon saw that they, here it is, stank before David, the children of Ammon sent and hired the Assyrians, and several of the people is listed in this deal that they go and hire to help them. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the hosts of the mighty men. And stinking thinking created a war where there was supposed to be comfort. And it's interesting to think through that sometimes we do that with people. Either we're having a bad day, or they're having a bad day, or something happens, and we start thinking the worst about them, thinking the worst about what their motives are, what they're doing. We become cynical, skeptical, and maybe it's something completely different, and we turn that into something that's bad. Somebody wants to come up and do something for us. We start thinking something about them, and we turn what was supposed to be a good situation into a bad, create a war where there was no war. And then here's what's even crazier about it. After we get through with looking at, they've come to me to try to be nice. I've thought something bad and created a bad situation. Then now they're mad because I've created, not because they were doing anything wrong, because I've treated them badly for my thinking. And now they are acting a little bit aggressive towards me because the way I've treated them. Right. And then I say, see, I was right the whole time. No, you weren't. You created the problem. The problem was not there. And people do this all the time. We do this to each other. And I think that, we would say sometimes, well, the devil's at work in our churches. I think sometimes our own personality and our own crazy, stinking thinking's at work in our churches, and the devil gets to sit on the sidelines, or principalities and powers, and just laugh and say, man, we got a day off. We're sitting back in our easy chairs watching you destroy yourselves with your own crazy thinking. And it's just a real mess. So I don't know if y'all have things y'all are adding into it, or y'all are just thinking cynically about what I'm saying right now. But I've got a few things I can add to it, but I want to hear what y'all have to say.
I'll say this. It's interesting. You made the statement, and I know Micaiah has said this before, as far as focusing on what's true.
Yeah.
You don't want to add your opinions to the facts. And if you look at the chapter before, David's literally going to the enemy camp and trying to show kindness. You see it in chapter 9, verse 1, that I may show him kindness. And then you find Mephibosheth, that I may show him the kindness of God. David's got this track record of trying to be kind to the quote-unquote enemy. So instead of focusing on that, they immediately get paranoid because of their thoughts. And the thing is your mind minds you.
Yeah.
What you think about is what you choose to think about.
Yeah.
What you dwell on is what you choose to dwell on.
Yeah.
So without getting super wordy and going off into neuroscience, you have these neurotransmitters in your brain that are affected by what you dwell on.
Yeah.
And there's a case study that was done about people with their thought process in a work environment. They made two groups of people. One group watched a 2-minute video about how stress is debilitating. One group watched a 2-minute video about how stress can enhance your workflow. And they tracked their work ethic, and they tracked their work for the next couple of months afterwards. And just 2 minutes of watching a negative video affected not only how they work and how they think, but it literally affected their blood pressure in their body. So it's just fascinating to me when you consider what all your mind impacts.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was just 2 minutes of about how stress can debilitate you.
Our thinking is crazy. How I've said this before, and I've used it as what you're looking at. But when we were doing motorcycle safety stuff in the military, and they told us don't look at the ground in front of you, or don't look wherever you're looking at when you're making a turn. That's where the bike is going to go.
Right.
And so if they said, somebody said, well, how is it that you have a whole field and a guy wrecks and hits the only tree in a field, or the only telephone pole in the field? And they said, well, because when he loses control, his eyes begin to look at the telephone pole, thinking, I hope I don't hit this pole. And then your body goes where your head and your eyes are looking. They said, so if you're making a turn, don't look at the ground right in front of you. Look at where you're wanting to turn to, and then your body will naturally carry you and your bike that way. Well, the issue is when you take that and put it into a spiritual deal, is where your focus and your mind is thinking, that's where everything else is going to go towards that same thing. So if you're always thinking cynically or thinking skeptically about everybody, and you're wondering, how come I have run-ins with everybody? Everybody's against me. It may not be that everybody was trying. It may be you're creating the problems by your thinking, and you say, I keep hitting trees every day in my life. Maybe it's because you're just looking for the bad, and you keep finding the bad everywhere.
Right. And I would have to say it's kind of crazy, because I was talking to somebody about everything we're literally talking about today, yesterday, and then someone sent me a reel this morning about what you just said about what you focus on is what you're going to hit every single time. So I think it was Simon Sinek said that this morning, the reel that they sent me. And I'd have to say the number one thing that I struggle with is being critical. I mean, I'm critical of myself. I'm critical of others. Like that's just a day-to-day battle. And I'm, just being completely transparent. And what's funny, and I think God the word of God, but I think God kind of slaps me in the face sometimes, because you'll be critical of someone or something, and then it turns out it was a good thing all along. And then God's like, well, look at you being critical. It was actually a good thing. Yeah. Like I remember one time, and I'm even critical of, I would say me and Dylan are best friends. We're really close.
He would say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he says that whenever we're not recording. The whenever we do, it's a different story. But I remember one time we were serving for the Ladies' Day, and I was like, Dylan's late like normal, and I was just thinking that, and then next thing you know, he pulled up with a bag of Chick-fil-A and gave me, he had bought me breakfast that morning, and I was just thinking the whole time, I'm like, why in the world would I, think like that? Or when someone doesn't show up on the street and we're sharing the gospel, or you instantly start thinking these things. And I remember even thinking that about my wife Hope, or she was thinking about me, or where is he at? Why is he late home? And it would be one of us getting each other coffee, or we would be doing something nice for something, or something happened in the life of someone, and instead of thinking, okay, well, they have a life too, they have things going on, we instantly go to, well, they don't want to be at church, and they're too afraid to share the gospel, and we always go to these things, and it's just, it's never good. I would rather, even if they were doing wrong, I would rather have the positive perspective of, what, I'm sure they're witnessing to somebody, that's why they're late, or I'm sure they're, despite if they're doing wrong or not. I'm not saying you put away the wrong that they do, but I'm just saying we should have a positive outlook toward them. And you were talking about studies. John Maxwell did a study of 100 self-made millionaires, and the one thing that they all had in common was that they looked at the best of everybody. Like every single person they came across, they found and pulled out the best of that person. They didn't look at the negative of that person. And that's definitely a success principle, not only in the Bible, because love thinketh no evil, but also from a business standpoint of, you'll go a lot further when you think positive of people. I mean, because what does negative do? It doesn't do anything but ruin your day, and then you end up ruining somebody else's because you're being critical of somebody else.
It's toxic.
And it's toxic, and oftentimes you share it with someone else. Where is so-and-so at? Why aren't they at church?
Yeah.
And then you start getting them thinking critically of that person. And so it never does any good at all.
Yeah.
Whether they're not there at all, I mean, it never does any good. I would rather just say, you know what, I'm sure they're busy right now. I'm sure they had something going on with their kids, or it's always better to do that.
Put a
I didn't mean
positive spin instead of a negative
put a positive
spin.
instead of a negative
That's exactly right. It's, so we can find ourselves being this way, even in our circles. We did the podcast on being a Pharisee the other day, and I already had somebody call me and tell me they appreciated that podcast. But in our circles, we as independent Baptists sometimes can get the idea of just being very suspicious and cynical and finding the negative. We do this, and I'm telling you, every one of them that is a preacher right now that's in this, you will understand it and appreciate what I'm about to say. Is when we meet a new person, like we meet another church group, and we meet another pastor, the first thing we're trying to do is figure out where he comes from, what he believes, how he believes it, what school he's from, what college he went to, what church group camp that and they're trying to find out clever ways to ask the questions without just coming out and saying, "Can you give me your resume and tell me your background?" And I heard somebody do a illustration one time. They said, two guys meet, and he's like, "Hey, where are you from?" Like, same areas, whatever. He says, "You go to church?" "Yeah." "What kind of church you go to?" "I go to a Baptist church." "Really? Baptist?" "Well, me too." "Wait a minute. What kind of Baptist church?" "Independent Baptist." "Yeah, me too." "Wait a minute. Is it King James?" He's like, "Yeah, it's King James." "Okay, great. All right. Well, wait a minute. Do you believe that that it is just preserved or it's inspired?" "I believe it's preserved." "Well, I believe it's inspired." Now we found something, and now we can't fellowship anymore. We look for the negatives that we can divide over, instead of the positives that we can unite over. And we just try to find that. We naturally are almost geared that way, and that's not really good for us to have that kind of spirit, where we're always thinking evil of somebody, trying to find ways to find something about somebody that we don't like that we can divide over. And there's obvious discernment. Look, we're not talking about not discerning something that's bad, that's going to influence me in the wrong way. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about being cautious or concerned. We're talking about being cynical and skeptical and finding fault and having that kind of spirit.
And like we talked about earlier, we had brought up Saul, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he had no reason at all to think that David was trying to take over his kingdom. I mean, he was nothing but loyal. He was nothing but trying to help the king, Saul. And because of one statement, he's like, "Oh, well, David's out to get the kingdom. He's out to take over. He's out to do all these things," because of a statement that was made. Instead of saying, "You know what, David's really loyal to me. He loves me. He's trying to be a help to me." It's instantly the cynical and being critical of someone else instead of just looking at the positive of what David's been.
Absolutely. And that what's interesting about that one, I think you said it before we even started, that Saul had made a statement about what more can he have but the kingdom. It's interesting that you're thinking you can turn a situation into reality. And here's a man here's a young man that does nothing. He wants nothing more than to please the king. He wants to build the king up. He wants to make the king successful. He's wanting to do everything he can. The king becomes suspicious of him and begins to say, all this kid wants is the kingdom. You know where it ends up? The kid gets the kingdom. But not because the kid wanted to try to take the kingdom from him, but because he became so distorted in his mind that he lost the kingdom. The young man didn't take the kingdom. He forfeited the kingdom because of his cynical, critical thinking.
And it was like you said the other day too, the children of Israel.
That's exactly.
They said that we're going to die in the wilderness. We're going to die in the wilderness. They end up dying in the wilderness because of the way that their thought process
That's where their focus was.
That's where their focus was. And I was trying to remember, there was another illustration that I was trying to think of, but it just completely slipped my mind the moment I started talking about that. But it's like you said, it's where your mind goes. It's gonna happen. Oh yeah, I remember it. So I mean, even you've been hurt. A lot of people have been hurt even in their past. And you start thinking Now you put a filter. Dylan was talking about the other day, the filters in your heart. Something happens, so it puts a filter in your heart towards everybody else because of that one filter.
Yep.
You know, someone cheats on you, so now you think, okay, I'm in a relationship. Now that person, if they're even talking to another, you know, a person of the opposite sex, they're trying to cheat on me. They're trying to get in that relationship, and now you have a filter towards them, and you're being critical. And we can't have those filters toward people. We can't have things that have happened in the past to allow it to be the future as well.
Well, okay, so I have just a couple of quick things we're going to say about this to kind of get into the meat of the lesson part of this, and that is point number one. Point number one is, you know, just refuse to be suspicious, and what it is based off our experience. So your experience will dictate kind of the filter of the way you look at stuff. Like, if somebody's had bad experiences with police, they grew up in a bad area where they've had a lot of run-ins with the police, they start thinking all police are bad. That's not true. And every time they see a police officer, they're thinking, oh, they're corrupt or whatever, because they've had an experience with one or something.
Right.
Or somebody that's had a bad experience in a church. I've been texting somebody back and forth trying to encourage them. They've been bounced around through many, many churches. And I'm, you know, how you been doing? Haven't seen you. Yeah, I've been kind of staying away from people. Why? Well, not all people, just church people. Well, why? And the issue is they've been hurt by somebody in a church, and now they're looking for the day that somebody from church hurts them again. I mean, they come into church guarded. They're sitting in the corner and just waiting for someone to say something to them, and so they're just looking for it. They're back there thinking, someone's going to hurt me. They've hurt me in the last 5 churches I've been in, so I'm just going to sit here. And somebody walks by them and doesn't say hello because that person's got, like, cancer report they got today. And they walk by them and they say, see, this place is full of unloving people, and that's all I needed to see, and they're out. They're just, because of their experiences, they're viewing it that way. Or like you said, a bad relationship, and now you're looking at all relationships as bad. The second thing I was going to say with that is we need to be ready to believe the best in people instead of ready to believe the worst. Just looking for a way to think the worst about somebody. And so I thought about your wife does the finances here and is doing a fantastic job of doing it. Let's just say that one day we do the count and we look at it and we're like, hey, it's off by $20 or it's off by you know $100 or whatever. The one that's trying to think the best, they're going to be, like you just said a while ago, putting the positive spin on it. Yeah, you know what? I bet you that they missed a 20 that was behind another 20, or I bet you they just didn't, you know, carry the one over, and that's why the 100 is off. We need to recount that and relook at that and just try to take care of it. The cynical mind would be like, yep, we laid hands too suddenly on this one. This one's in there too quickly. She's probably a thief. Should have done a deeper background check on her, you know. The cynical mind just travels to the worst case scenario immediately, where the other type of mind, the love, the charity, thinking no evil, is trying to put the best spin on it.
Right.
Especially with somebody that their track record, like what you were saying a while ago, their track record, and you said it, the track record of David is a person seeking to be kind. So especially when a person has a track record that they're trying to be good, don't let somebody make you think bad about them. You know, God had done nothing but good for Adam and Eve, and they allowed someone to get their mind to think that he's withholding the best from you. He knows in the day you eat thereof that you're going to be like gods, and try to get you to think that God's trying to hold something back from you when God's done nothing but been good to you your whole life. That's you've just got to be careful. It's like you have a family that misses church, and you say they missed church. I bet it's because they went, you know, to Reno over the weekend and went gambling, or you could say, I hope that they're okay and they're not sick. You know, I hope that they're feeling. You can think the wrong things about people,
right,
instead of thinking the right things. I've thought about this several times. You know, whenever you said it a while ago about. This is a perfect example. All right, I'm running late because I got stuck in traffic, or I stopped to get coffee or get Chick-fil-A. You know, you didn't get Chick-fil-A for me that day, but anyway, so I'm running late because of just thinking pretty bad
You're
about you
being
right
cynical,
now.
yeah. You give me Chick-fil-A. But anyway.
But that's just a good example. But you know what you do? You come up with excuses for why I'm late or why things are not going well. We find an excuse for ourselves. But here's what we do when somebody else is running late. We find a way to accuse them.
Right.
We want to excuse ourselves but accuse others, when maybe what we ought to be doing is looking for, instead of accusing somebody, look for ways to excuse them.
Right.
I bet they're just having a bad day.
It's like you said with the speeding ticket too that one time.
That's exactly right. We're driving down the road thinking, where's a cop when you need one, when somebody flies by us, but then when we see the blue lights in our back, we're going, mercy, mercy. We want justice for somebody else.
Right.
We want mercy for ourselves. So maybe the idea, instead of demanding justice when somebody else is doing something wrong and thinking negatively, maybe we try to find a way to give mercy,
Right.
to make an excuse for them,
Sure.
and help them. Let me say a couple more things. Suspicion destroys relationships, and it makes for disunity. You're talking about with your wife. If your wife shows up bringing you coffee or something like that, and she's running late, we can build disunity and cause a problem instead of building trust and unity in there by our thinking. Our
Right.
thinking can cause a lot of issues. This was a good one. Suspicion. And this is one we'll use a little illustration here that maybe make y'all feel better. Is suspicion reveals more about your own spirit, and so there's a good illustration we use sometime. When I was years ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago in my life. No, it really wasn't. It wasn't that long ago. That maybe 10 years ago or so, I was telling a story to somebody that whenever I used to be the school principal at Happy Valley, people would stop in all the time and ask for money. And I really didn't have much money, and we were making nothing working as a Christian school principal, and my wife is a teacher. And a lot of months we were just barely even getting by. And so people would show up, and one day I had like $5 in my wallet, and they asked for money for gas. And I'm thinking, how'd you get all the way back here to this church off the freeway looking for gas? I was a little bit suspicious already. I had just moved out of being a criminal investigator, so my mind's always investigating everything. So I'm looking for all the signs of lying as they're talking to me, and I'm thinking, these people are lying. But I gave them $5. And they went and jumped in their car to take off to go get gas. So they tell me, we're going to go get gas. Then I jumped in my car and tailed them. And I'm following them down the road, like at a healthy car length back, and all that stuff. And I'm just watching. They pass one gas station, they pass a second one, they pass a third one, and now I'm closer to them. And they whip into a parking lot. I pull in behind them. They spin around. The lady pulls up next to me and rolls on the window and wads up the money and throws it at me and cusses me out. It says, "You follow me?" And I said, "Yeah, I was just following you to see where you're going if you're actually using the money." Well, I told that story to an older preacher one time, and I was telling him about how, and I thought I was just telling a story about how people do stuff with money. And he says to me, he says, "Brother, I'm just going to tell you that story tells me more about you than it tells about them." And I was thinking, well, that wasn't the way I expected the story to go. I expected him to go, "Yep, people are pretty sorry sometimes." Instead, he's like, "Turn it around like you're sorry." And I was like, "Oh man, this felt like a dart to the heart." And he said, "You're just too cynical." And I remember thinking, you know what? I am too cynical. I need to fix that. And that was a rebuke that did not feel very good at all. It felt pretty embarrassing to my own self, but it did show me something about a blind spot of my own self, that I was becoming a pretty skeptical and cynical person. And so it does reveal a lot about your own spirit. And so
I'll say this, I laugh, but the amount of, so a lot of times when I'm uncomfortable, I go to humor anyways. So the amount of times I've just made a joke and jest just to make myself comfortable, and then it turns into like a pretty ridiculous, harsh rebuke.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay. And like you said, the blind spot thing is, it's never fun, but it's helpful. You need those things to grow.
Yeah.
And sometimes even, like, I don't know if y'all are this way. I'm not a people pleaser. Like, no, I'm just kidding. You can assume that, like, if I'm going to say something you're going to agree with what I'm saying.
yeah.
You could assume what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I'm thinking like, oh, he's going to really like me for this.
Yeah.
And then it just ends up turning into me looking like an idiot.
Yeah.
The amount of times that's happened in my life is a blessing. But I'll say this, my father-in-law, he's a great man, loves the Lord, walks with God, all those great things. And one of the most convicting but helpful things I've learned just from knowing him is just believe the best about people. I know we've already talked about that a little bit. And, you know, we shouldn't be surprised. The world's evil. The world's wicked. It shouldn't take us by surprise when wicked things happen.
Right.
But it shouldn't also put us in a position to just assume it's going to happen
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, I mean,
Be circumspect.
Right.
Be sober. But don't be looking at your brothers thinking they're full of the devil.
Right.
I mean, don't start looking for the bad guy behind every tree. You know, don't live that way. Be discerning, but don't live your life thinking that everybody around you is doing bad and that they are bad and they've got a bad
Right.
heart. And don't believe everything you see. Don't believe everything you hear.
Right.
Try to put the best spin on things. Somebody's going to say, "Oh, you know, so and so did such and such." Don't believe that. You know, don't just let your mind readily go to believing something. You know, try to put the better spin on it. I think they probably misunderstood them. That's probably not true. Until you have the facts that it is true, think the best of people instead of allowing your mind to think the worst of people.
Right.
And I think you'll guard yourself. Because, again, charity thinketh no evil. Just remind yourself of that. The Holy Spirit brings that verse to mind a lot in my head when I'm thinking about something the wrong way. The Holy Spirit will say, "Hey, listen, charity thinketh no evil."
Right.
And then I have to yield myself to that verse. And I have to think, yeah, but I think that they're doing, yeah, but you need to yield yourself to the fact that you're not supposed to be thinking this way. And if you think this way, you may create a battle where there was supposed to be comfort.
Right.
You can create I say it this way, you can create a conflict where there was supposed to be comfort.
Mm.
And too many of us are doing that around ourselves, in our churches, in our relationships, in our marriages even.
Yes,
We're
sir.
creating conflict where there was supposed to be comfort.
Mm.
And so maybe it's something to think about today. Hopefully be a help to you. Maybe the takeaway you need to get from this today is, I'm thinking, what more can you have but the kingdom? And I'm going to die here in this wilderness. And maybe your negative thinking is taking you towards exactly that. And maybe you just start thinking about better things,
Right.
so that you can get yourself on better things. I'll close out with saying, Brother James had hinted towards this a while ago. We do something sometimes, and I think we referred to it here before, called a stroke file. And I don't know why they called it a stroke file, but that's what it's termed. And you take a 3x5 card, and this works good in your relationships. And you write down on the top of the note card, God, and then 1, 2, and 3 underneath it, and then just write down your spouse, and then 1, 2, and 3. And what you're doing is every morning you get up and you write down 3 things that you're thankful for about God. He got me up this morning. I'm saved. The sunrise. You know, whatever. And then you write down 3 things you're thankful for your wife, your spouse about. I mean, this morning, if I was to write them this morning, I'd say, okay, beautiful. She made me waffles. Great mother. You know, you could just write things like that down. And you do that every day, because what you're trying to do with that for like 30 days, you're trying to get your mind to, if there be anything that's lovely, if there any have good report, if there's anything that's honest, think on these things. You're trying to get your mind to switch gears from being such a critical, cynical, suspicious, skeptical thinker.
It's going to take work.
Yeah, it's going to take work. And it's developing a new way of thinking. It's renewing the mind. And our minds have been pulled into with the news and with all the negativity and the things we've seen in our experiences of hurts, and even in our churches, the things that we focus in on, we end up becoming a pretty cynical people. And we need to kind of get ourselves into thinking better. I mean, I've heard some of in our circles, preachers, you know, get rough about people that are too positive. And you know, bless God, we ought to be more negative. But there is something to be said about thinking on good instead of thinking on the negative and the bad all the time. So we just got to guard our way of thinking. I think that'd be a help.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us on this episode of Victory Vision. And if this has been a blessing to you, share it with somebody else and keep it going. I'm glad that I didn't even know that there was a threshold of what podcasts sometimes don't make it past, and I'm glad that we're sticking through it. And I can tell you this: the reason why we're sticking with that is not because of me; it's because of Dylan and Micaiah are driving this and trying to come up with ideas. They do a great job, and I sure am glad that they're here doing what they're doing, and they add a lot to our church and our ministry and to this podcast. We're very thankful for them. So join us again. Looking forward to seeing you the very next time, and we love you, and God bless you.